Welcome to the Thriving Tides podcast. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Julianne. If you're an entrepreneur or busy individual looking for self-care ideas, you're in the right place.
And we can't wait to share our experiences with you.
Awesome. So we're back for another episode of Thriving Tides, and we have a special guest with us here tonight. You may also notice Stephanie is not here. So I'm with our guest on my own, and we're really excited to learn more about Angela. So we have Angela McDonald here. She is the owner of Angela McDonald Consulting, and it's a company that offers CFO and bookkeeping services. She obtained her MBA and her CPA-CMA designation, and she spent the first part of her career working in industry for companies as the internal accounting support, most recently as the corporate controller for a multinational biotech company. After working with different organizations and helping them grow, she decided that she wanted to go venture out on her own and start her own business to do this and help other companies grow. And so she started her business back in February of 2019. So just past your 2-year anniversary. That's exciting. And so for those past 2 years, what Angela's been doing is assisting small to medium-sized businesses across PEI really step up to their full potential. So thank you so much, Angela, for agreeing to be here with us, or with me, with me here tonight, and to talk to us and the Thriving Tides community. I'm sure you're going to have lots of great nuggets to share with these entrepreneurs that are listening. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. And I know this is your first podcast, so we feel very special to have you here first before everyone else starts snatching you up.
You have very high hopes in my performance.
I do. And I know you'll be great. But we're here to have a conversation, right? We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about what you do in your business and kind of see where the conversation goes. So I would love to start with getting to know your background a little bit more. I know that we've crossed paths quite a bit over the last couple of years too. So I'm starting to get to know you, but there's lots I still don't know also. And in my research about you, I saw that you grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So I'd love to know what that was like for you and whether or not that was what really sparked the desire to start your own business.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. So growing up in an entrepreneurial family, similar to your growing up, like my grandparents fished. So, I mean, entrepreneurial. My parents were in aquaculture. So not lobster fishing, but still owned their own business. It's a completely different lifestyle than just having parents that go to work from 9 to 5 and come home. So, I mean, sometimes it gives them more freedom to spend time with you, and sometimes they have to miss things because there's no other choice. But you grow up seeing what hard work really can do for you. And, you know, pros and cons to both situations for sure. But I think when you grow up in that atmosphere and you see kind of the passion that somebody puts into something, and from both sides of my family, both sets of grandparents and my parents, it does something to you. I mean, I don't really know anyone that just went to work 9 to 5 year round and did that type of thing. And I mean, I know lots of people that did that, but not in my immediate circle that I would have seen as a child. So growing up in that way, I mean, then when you go out and go into the workplace and you are kind of going into somebody else's workplace and working 9 to 5, I liked what I did, and I liked the idea of what I was doing and that I was helping businesses and all of those things. But like, I didn't really love the mission of the business. Like, it wasn't my dream. And every time I was offered a job opportunity, it was like, oh, that's such a great opportunity. People would love to be able to have that security. And I just thought, like, wow, that would be so boring. So my youngest child is 3. And after I had her, I was offered a really good job, what most people would think would be the dream job. It was working from home mostly before working from home. COVID was a thing, and substantially more money than you would typically earn on PEI. But there was some travel involved. So, you worked from home, but sometimes you get to go to cool places. And I was sitting around saying, like, I don't think I can do that. Like, I believe in what they do, but that is not my life's work. So I think having a purpose to me is really important. And I really think the entrepreneurial side of watching somebody really do that had a huge impact in that mentality for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So if you're both sets of grandparents and your parents were all of that nature and that background, you wouldn't it'd be hard to even imagine what a 9 to 5 looks like. And it would probably feel very restrictive in many ways.
Yeah. And not only restrictive, but like the lack of being able to dream big, right? I'm in finance, and that's typically not something that is attributed to finance professionals, I don't think, based on stereotypes in the industry. But like when I think of most of the people I went to school with, and not all of them, but a lot of them now are in government roles, which is fine. And that's definitely a great place for a lot of people. But I don't think I'd be able to do that simply because of just, the bureaucracy of it. Like, I don't know if I would feel like I could actually make a difference. And that's really important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's important to understand what your own values are. That's something that I work with a lot of clients on, right? Like, if you don't know what your values are and something is feeling off, that's probably one of the key things, is that you're trying to fit somebody else's, follow someone else's dream or fit someone else's values. And then there's this huge disconnect. So I think it's awesome that you were able to identify that early on in your career and say, I'm going to take this big risk. Really, I'm sure people from the outside would be like, what is she? She could have this cushy job in government or, in a corporation and be banking all this money. How did that feel to know that there was that security, that offer that you had, going back to work after your youngest was born? And was that a difficult decision for you, or?
I want to say yes, but the real answer is no.
Fair. Yeah.
So not at all. Like, I think it had run its course. There was a time where it would have definitely felt like a hard decision, and that's why I never made it. But at that point in my life, I had enough security in my life to know, if this doesn't work, there's lots of those jobs out there. I can go back into the job market a year from now, get a job and be fine. And I'll never know until I try. So when I had this job offer, and they called me and offered me the job, and I looked at my husband and I was like, I have to say no. Like, my gut is telling me I have to say no. And as soon as I knew that I had to say no to that, I knew I had to do my own thing.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been a really powerful moment.
Yeah. And I mean, I had an inkling all along. Like, I had told people like, oh, I'm teasing around with this idea, but I'm applying to jobs too. And I'm only applying to the jobs that I would really like to do. And then I was offered one of the jobs that I would really like to do. And I'm like, no, that's not it. That's still not it.
Yeah. Good noticing, because especially if it was something that you really did think you wanted, right? But then in your gut and in your heart, you're probably like, nope, something's still off. So not worth it.
And I was coming off of maternity leave. I think without that maternity leave, I never would have taken the jump, maybe, because it felt like less of a risk, because I was already 2 steps outside, right? I was already removed. It would have been a lot harder for me to remove myself. And I kind of convinced myself I was comfortable. And not until I took myself out of that atmosphere did I realize, like, that's not what I want. That's not what I really want to do for the rest of my life. So I think kind of just life events helped kind of spur that decision for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. What advice would you give someone who might be in a similar position right now, who's kind of toying with, do I stay in this comfort zone and the known and the security, or do I finally take that leap and follow my passion?
I have this conversation with clients often, whether they're already in business and they want to grow or whether they're looking to start a business. And my philosophy is always that I'm never going to tell you not to do it. I'm always going to tell you to do it. If you feel like you can make it work, you should try to make it work. Let's just figure out how to make it work safely first. So don't go in blind. Like, let's not say, I'm going to buy this $1 million business and everything's going to be fine.
Just trust the universe.
Well, some entrepreneurs, a lot of them, that is it, right? Like, it's all going to work out. It's all fine. And you have to be a little crazy, right? Like, there's a little bit of that a lot of the time. I feel that. Yeah. I do. But it's not usually like a conversation of, that's a bad idea. I'm never going to tell you that's a bad idea. I'm always going to say, how are we going to make that work? Like, right now, it doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense. Let's sit down and make it make sense. So, I mean, with some planning, and obviously, as you or anybody else knows, like, planning's only so good. But at least if you've thought out all the situations, you have half a chance.
Yeah, right.
But you can never go back and do it. Like, you can always find a new job later. There's lots of jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess too, like, it would be, in the future, do you really want to look back and wonder, like, what if? You know, could I have done it? Would it have worked out? That's not the dream.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think that's such a supportive approach, right? Where it's like, yes, do it, and make sure that you're doing it in a way that you're still protecting yourself and you're not going to, lose everything that you've already worked for.
Yep. For
Yeah.
sure.
Very cool. That's neat. So you work with clients then who even maybe aren't quite to the point of starting their business. Do you help people kind of right in that startup phase too?
Yeah. On a much smaller scale. So I do some coaching for the startup zone in Charlottetown.
Right.
It's one of those things that doesn't necessarily pay as good as my other clients, but I love to do it so much that I do it anyway.
Yes.
And then I do some business plans for small startup clients. And it's just one of those things that my personality is that I get bored really easily. Probably why I started my own business, but I can't do the same thing all the time. So I do those types of things just so that I get a variety of work to do.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. And sometimes it probably makes sense to work on, the lower paying jobs or things like that to a certain extent, right? You don't want to fill your portfolio with that. But if it's something that fills this need for you and energizes you, and you can make it work, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
And I mean, let's be honest, there's no saying that those startup companies aren't going to be clients in 5 years.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Wow. Angela helped me so much whenever I was like toying with the idea and not really sure what I was going to do. And now that I'm there, I'm definitely going back and hiring her to get me to that next level. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's great. Planting those seeds, right? That's what it's a lot of it. Go back to the farm world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and PEI is so relationship based also that, build that trust and show your credibility. And then it does come back to you.
Yeah. It's a very small business community. There's like this whole idea of 3 degrees of separation. I don't even think there's a degree of separation in the PEI business community. I've learned. So it's interesting. Like I've had talks with people and it's like, oh, I've done work for so-and-so and so-and-so. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm friends with them. I'll call them. And perfect. I'm like, okay, great.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's great in many ways, and then in some ways it's like, ooh, like that's interesting. Like I talked to a client the other day who was like, I feel like everywhere I go, people know who I am, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. And I mean, that's PEI, business community or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about your business model? So I think you have like startup, scale up. There's a few different paths that you can take clients down.
Yeah. So my business model was really born out of necessity, just because I knew I wanted to work for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at that point where, like, I have girlfriends who every time I talk to them, I would be saying, like, how can we make a business? I need to work for myself. What can I do that would be a good business idea? And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, why don't you just do what you're already good at? So that's kind of what happened. It just took me a long time to figure that out. So what I'm doing really is, in any economy, right now, CPAs in industry are really hard to get. There is a shortage of CPAs across the board. So getting ones with industry experience is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So because, I mean, they're happy where they are, or the government takes them, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's also a whole slew of companies who are not ready to hire somebody full time, but they really need to look at things that a bookkeeper can't necessarily do for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like full financial projections, like looking at cash flow, like trying to find funding, and a whole bunch of other things.
Right.
And, you know, they might have enough work for somebody to come in one day a week or one day a month. But if you're looking to hire somebody one day a week or one day a month, you're never going to find that.
Mm.
And so I really took the opportunity there for either somebody who is looking for somebody and can't find someone and needs a gap filled, or somebody who doesn't have a full-time need and needs a gap filled, and kind of am selling myself as that. Now, I have competition. There's definitely other people who do this. I would say firms definitely do it. Like Grant Thornton, for instance, have a whole department towards this. But they focus more on higher end businesses for sure. Obviously, they're a whole corporation with overheads and everything, so they are going to be more expensive than me. That's just how business works. But they're also more focused on kind of the larger scale projects. From what I can tell, I don't know. I've never worked there. But my major competition is usually retired people that just want to work, 20 hours a week because they're not quite ready to retire yet.
Yeah, they're phasing out.
Yeah, and they want something interesting to do because they're not quite ready to give up, but they've worked in corporate their whole life. So they get one client and that's all they want. So they can usually get that through their network. They get one client and then they're happy. And then the other people who do it are people who have full-time jobs and then just do it on the side. So there are a few in PEI that would do what I do, but not a lot. And I would say there's a pretty big demand for it just because it's such a tough place to hire somebody right now.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And it's such a great bridge between, I need a little bit more than simply a bookkeeper, but I don't need a full-time employee. And yeah, that's great. Right. So depending on your client, I'm guessing that you work more or less hours depending on what their needs are, what you decide to contract. And so it's not just here's my canned offer. It's, let's look exactly at what you need and then we'll build it out from there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have one client who they had somebody leave and they couldn't hire somebody to fill the position. So I went in for quite some time for 2 days a week and just, tried to keep the ship afloat until they found someone. I had another client who I gave one day a week for a year to help them scale up. And then I have other clients who, I might do 2 hours a month for, and I'm just really helping them with their growth plans and then checking in. Or it could be, one day a quarter. It's completely different for every business and what they're comfortable with and what they need. And then, so you talked about scaling and refining and startup. So that's from my website. And really what that indicates is the scale up is the company who is ready to take it to the next level. So they need to get from, $1 million in sales to $5 million in sales in the next 2 years. Well, how do we make that happen? The refine is really somebody who, maybe they're not scaling up, but something's a little messy and they need some help cleaning it up. Some of those people, even they might already have a full-time controller, but the controller might have walked into a mess and it's like, listen, it's going to take more than just me to fix this. I need some extra hands to get this cleaned up fast. And then you move on. And then the startup is really more the business plans, the coaching, things like that, forecasting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then obviously the bookkeeping, which I have staff now that do bookkeeping.
Yeah, that's great. That's a recent addition to your group, right?
January. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. And then, so I'm making the assumption, I guess I'm asking you, the clients that you're bookkeeping for, do you do often like just one or the other, or like do you have your staff doing the bookkeeping and then you're meeting with the owner to do some of the other stuff? Or I guess there's a bit of everything perhaps.
It's kind of a combination. So there's usually, it depends really, but typically the bookkeeping clients do not need me involved.
Okay.
Typically what the bookkeeping clients might need is for me to set up some reporting that then my bookkeeper could feed the information into every month. So yes, I'm still saying this is what you should pay attention to, but I'm not necessarily billing them for my time. That's something that is just standard for everyone. So, but then there are some of them who, for instance, want my time. They want to sit down with somebody and be advised on a monthly or quarterly basis. Are there any red flags? What does this look like? What should we be paying attention to? So it really depends on the client. Typically, though, by the time they get to the CFO level, they probably should already have a full-time bookkeeper on staff, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's crazy how much different stuff you do. But when I think back to like earlier in this conversation, even you said you get bored really easily. So it sounds like you've designed yourself a business that does not allow for boredom.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I will also say, there's this preconceived notion when you hire somebody that's like, oh, she's going to come in and there's going to be this mess. Like everybody's a mess. There's never not something, right?
Yeah.
So people are like, oh, well, I don't do this and I don't do that. It's like, that's fine. Like,
and that's why they hired you.
Well, and there's been periods in my business when my books have been a mess because I've been behind. Like, not a big deal. So really talking to people and saying like, I get it. I get that you are embarrassed or whatever, but that's why you're outsourcing this, because you don't love to do it. So
yeah. When you started saying that, I had myself thinking about people that I know who will like tidy up the house before the housekeeper comes over. It's just like, what are you doing here? Because they get nervous that their house cleaner is going to judge them for the state of their house. But it's like, no. So it's like, oh no, Angela, don't look at my books. You're going to judge me or whatever, right? But it's like, if you don't love it, there's people like Angela who can take it over and do a really great job of it and help you understand it too, maybe. Because this kind of leads into my next question is like, what are some of the most common challenges that that clients are facing Is it that they just don't understand it, or they don't want to do it? Or, is there outside, like external circumstances that they might be more challenged with?
I think that can be different things for different clients. But at the end of the day, it usually boils down to just time or the ability to do the work. Right now, I mean, globally, the most common thing that I'm seeing is just struggling with uncertainty. So entrepreneurs obviously always deal with uncertainty, because when you own your own business, you can never truly predict what's going to happen. But they usually created that risk on purpose. So it's within their control to create that risk. With the economic environment right now, it's not. So people are really struggling because they don't know, how long can I do this for before I have to make major changes? Or a lot of them would have already had to make those major changes.
Yes.
And the statistic says, which I don't know if I buy into or not, but I did find a study that said 61% of small businesses have no form of budget whatsoever. I would think it's higher.
That's large. Oh, and you would think I think it's higher.
Yeah.
Wow.
But because I guess it depends. Like if it's until you're starting to, go for large amounts of funding or making large changes, a lot of people just think, I have a handle on it in my head. Or I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who said, why would I do a budget? It's always wrong. And I totally understand that. I totally get that is actually true. But I can tell you that my clients who had a budget before COVID happened, they were a lot less stressed because we had a starting point.
Right.
So the people that I was working with that didn't have any form of budgeting during COVID, and then we had to start from scratch and then deal with COVID at the same time, it was a little more challenging. So people get embarrassed that they don't have a budget, which is silly because, I just told you that the statistics say that most people don't.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing that I think people just don't have the time to do. And I can tell you, this is a great idea. And you can tell me, I know I should do that for my business, but I'm also doing all of the other things.
Yes.
So how, when do you want me to do that? When I'm sleeping? And I get it, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing. Oftentimes what happens is the financial piece of your business is the piece that your client can't see. And it's usually the only piece that your client can't see or your customer can't see. So it's the piece that suffers because you can hide it and nobody knows if it's messy. So I really think time is usually it. And oftentimes in small business, you don't have the money to outsource all of those things. So something's got to give.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something we talk about on the podcast a lot, right? Is a small business owner, you wear every single hat. And some of them you just don't ever want to put on. So, but that's a great distinguishing factor that you just made is the finances nobody else sees. So it's really easy to say, well, I got to make sure my marketing's on point and whatever my product or my service is, because that's what the client is seeing. That's what the world is seeing. And so we're putting on this persona that everything's great and fine. And then we're dying on the inside and our finances are a mess and we're super stressed out. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's, you really drew a line there for me. I can see the visual of that representation and, it can be scary. And I think, working with someone like you who is doing that whole thing for her own business as well, is that you have the advantage of being able to really say, I understand, versus working with someone who works for a corporation who's trying to help you and, not to naysay them. I'm sure they have their own strengths, but there's just something about sitting across from another business owner that builds that trust much faster. And you really just feel seen and heard when you know that, wow, okay, they struggle with stuff too. And this, like, running a business is hard. It's really scary at times, and your finances are very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, now I got myself stressed out.
Well, and I mean, what my whole objective is to try and take people's stress away. Like, I mean, I do want to make you more money. I always get a little bit excited when I go work for a client for the day and I can find them more money than I've cost them for the day. But like, my whole objective is, like, one of my first questions usually is, what keeps you up at night? What is the one thing you do laying in bed at 1 a.m. thinking, I can't sleep because of this? That's what I want to know, because that's what I want to fix first. Because really, like, that's the stuff that's going to make a difference.
Yeah. You need to be rested to run your business. So
yeah.
let's get that done.
A lot of the times there are, like, you know, we're making lots of money, but I have no idea on the cash flow of the business. So, like, those are pretty standard calculations that you can do. And the peace of mind that brings people is enormous.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's, yeah. And I find that money sometimes is like a taboo thing or something, you know, like in your group of friends, or even myself with other entrepreneurs. Like, I'm getting more comfortable just throwing actual numbers out there, because then it feels more normal and it's not like this weird, dirty secret that I have. But do you find that with clients too, that just to name the numbers and say them out loud is a challenge for some?
Yeah. I find it, as you work with them and they understand what the numbers mean, or they pay attention to the numbers, it gets very easy very quickly. If I'm working with somebody and they're not super confident with financial information, that becomes a little bit of a struggle, because they don't pay attention to it because they don't really understand it, or, you know, they don't want to feel stupid because they don't understand it. But, you know, I really want to teach people, look, this is what you pay attention to. This is what this means. I don't want to throw a report at you that you don't understand. And then they're like, oh, that's what that number means. Well, now I want to change it. So I don't think they're going around telling their friends, but it becomes easier within the business to talk about it, for sure. I don't know what this strange thing about people and money is. I don't know. Yeah,
it's just a weird thing. But yeah, you're right. Like, just the understanding of it. Because that's probably another reason for the avoidance. It's like, well, I don't understand what those reports mean, so why would I look at them? And if you can scale it down to a place that they can just be like, okay, these are the numbers I need to pay attention to. This is the range that I'm targeting. If it's outside of that, then I got to do something about it. If it's in it, then I can go to sleep through the night. Everything's fine. At least on the financial standpoint.
And you know what? Usually they do understand it. There's a lot of times where you explain it to people and they're like, yeah, okay, I knew that. But it's the same as anything, right? Like, if it's not their specialty, it's whatever you want to call it. If they're feeling imposter syndrome in the moment of sitting in a room with a financial person. But usually it's pretty easy conversation for somebody to understand. And usually they do already have a pretty good grasp on what it is that I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's like you're instilling that confidence in them. Like, you know this, you got this, right? It's not. Yeah. How would a client or a potential client, or just a business owner, this is a better way to ask it. How would a business owner know that it's time to reach out to you and start getting your services?
I think it could mean different things for different people, but typically the tipping point is when they feel like they don't have a handle anymore on all of the financials. Maybe they're working with somebody working with an external bookkeeper, you know, and they know their bookkeeping is going fine, but they're just using that information for taxes. and nothing else, and they have no idea how the company is actually performing, then I would want to have a conversation with that person and say, no, listen, let's set something up. Like I do very small projects for some people, and then I do very large projects for some people. And sometimes it's as simple as sitting down and saying, this is what you did last year. Here is the trend in your business. Here's what you should watch. This is what I think might happen this year. Do you think it's realistic? Let's get back together in 3 months and talk about what actually happened. So I think it would be more along the lines of, if there is some sort of stress around the financial piece and they don't feel confident in themselves and in the business in the way that they understand what's happening, then that's probably time to ask for help, because that is something you want to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that. It's not, a reach out. It's almost like you could just go for like a little tune up now and then, or it could be like consistent maintenance.
Yeah.
It's almost like build your own adventure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. I like that. And so thinking more about you and you running your business too, right? So this, you've been doing it for 2 years now, just over a year into it, and we hit a pandemic. So that's a lot for you. You're not only managing that for your own business, but that would have been a big part of every conversation you would have had with your clients. What did you learn facing a pandemic that you'd like to share as some, little nuggets for people on how to stay resilient and keep going?
I think the one thing through the pandemic that really kind of threw me off my game a little bit was everybody's, we need to pivot. And it's like March 15th, and like by March 20th, I was so over this pivot word. And I understand, like we need, but like I was asking people, do you even, like, what do you think this is doing to your business? What can you work the way you're working now? So I think throughout the pandemic, the one thing that I kind of learned the most was to do some sort of sensitivity analysis with my clients. I was doing it with some people if there was a whole lot of uncertainty in their business, but now I recommend doing it with everyone. And what that means is you're creating 3 different budgets, really. So you have a worst case, a realistic case, and a best case scenario for the operations of your business. Mm-hmm. What you're looking at is, okay, if I do better than what I expect, what do I need to make that a reality? Say my sales increase by 50%. What do I need to happen? Am I going to have to hire new people? When do I think I might have to hire them? Do I need more space? Do I need all the things? Then if we look at the worst case scenario, which obviously COVID would have been, is at what point does it make to just shut down and take a break than to stay open? Or at what point do I need to make a decision? Okay, now I need to lose half of my expenses somehow, or whatever that might look like. Now, I know that there were a lot of businesses doing really great things during COVID. A lot of businesses, even in PEI, that I'm familiar with, they changed and they did a lot of really great things, and it made sense. And I'm sure that they flourished just because of that. And that's fantastic. But I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of businesses that may have lost more money than they needed to because they changed the way they operated. And I had conversations with a group, one of the presentations online through COVID time.
One of those.
Yeah. And there was restaurant owners in there. And I was talking about, COVID shutting down your restaurant, and you still have costs. You still have to pay for your restaurant. You still have to do all the things, but your staffing cost is gone, unfortunately, for the staff. And your food cost is gone. Really hard decision to make, obviously, because people don't want to lose their staff. And I totally appreciate
Absolutely.
that. The flip side is that they were allowed to open for takeout, but then they needed to stock the fridges. They needed to have multiple staff. They were paying for all of those things, and some places weren't doing enough takeout to cover those costs. So they were actually worse off by doing takeout. I know some people probably did it just because they wanted the visibility of staying open,
that's
and
what
they
I was
were
just
willing.
going to ask.
They were willing to take the loss, but know that you're making that decision, right? Look at it and say, I know I'm going to lose $20,000 by doing this, but I'm willing to do that because I don't want to be forgotten at the end of all of this. But just being able to know that and not finding out at the end of the year.
Yeah.
The panic,
like, what?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Yeah. I'm sure there was a lot of that. And being in tax season right now too, I can imagine some of the conversations that are happening. Yeah. So are you, obviously you had to do that sensitivity analysis quickly on the fly in the pandemic. And now, is that something that's normal practice for you? Maybe it was before too, but that people should be doing all the time because we just don't know, right?
I think so. I didn't typically push everybody to do it before.
Right.
It was something that I would, if somebody was starting something new and they really had no idea, then we would do it. If they had been doing it for a while and things were pretty status quo, then there wasn't a lot of reason to be honest. But now there is. Things changed. So it is something that I'm starting to do with everyone now. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, best case scenario was 2019. Like there was the best case scenario was you saw no growth, but you went back to normal. So, you know, it was usually
people had that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So it was usually best case scenario was status quo. The mid range was, you know, you were allowed to be opened, but with restrictions. And then the worst case scenario was you might have to be closed for a lot of the year. But looking at those things, it's really hard conversations, but then you're starting the discussion so that entrepreneurs can make the decision when they have the time to make it and not when they're panicking about what to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So much fear and the uncertainty and the unknown. And yeah, if you can at least have some facts to hold on to and know, okay, this is what I'm making a solid decision on. I think that's always the best choice. Yeah.
And I mean, let's be honest. None of that would have really made a difference.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID.
Right.
It wouldn't. Like, this has never happened before. Complete shutdown of economies. Like there's no amount of planning that could have helped you through that. So at this point during COVID, the real test was really how long can I survive and what do I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And here we are a year later, having thought we'd be in a much better position now, and we're still not there. Right. So these conversations need to keep happening as well. Right. And just finding out where can you stay the course and where do you have to make those tough choices? I know for the tourism industry right now, there's a lot of those decisions being made for this summer, and it breaks my heart. Like it's really, really tough.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how do you, this leads me to like a couple of questions. Like those are tough conversations for you to have, right? I mean, your brain power, yes, is there. You know this stuff. It's where you're an expert, but you have a heart. And so you have people sitting in front of you and having to have these really difficult conversations. And I wonder, like, how do you manage that, or what type of self-care do you incorporate into your routine to make sure that you're not carrying that heavy weight throughout the rest of your day and you know, into the evening when you want to hang out with your kids and your husband?
Right. So I'll be completely honest in saying that last year I did not do a good job of that.
Yeah. Fair.
During 2020, my business picked up. I mean, I almost feel guilty saying that because I know so many people have struggled, but because people realized that their financial information was required, that they needed some sort of forward-looking something, then I was getting a lot of phone calls for things like that, or clients that I might deal with for an hour here or there all of a sudden needed a big project because of COVID. And I'm grateful that they turned for me, and I'm grateful I had the work. As someone who is self-employed, COVID could have been detrimental to my family. So I'm grateful that it wasn't. In saying that, I have 3 small children who had no school or daycare. I have a husband who works in essential service. So I was waking up at 5 a.m. and working until 8, and then I was working when I went back to bed to make it all work. So over the last year, I've done a really poor job of that. Typically, in normal circumstances, I would say that probably exercise or even just going for walks and listening to podcasts. I'm someone who requires, although I am an extrovert, but I do require quiet time to just think. My mind is always working. I work with my brain, not my hands.
Yes.
So at some point during the day, I just need to shut it off and just go be in the quiet. And that's very important. And if that doesn't happen for a couple of days, I get very anxious very quickly. So I know that about myself. So I will just kind of say, like, I need to shut myself in for a little bit. So, last year I was going for walks a lot. I kind of did really poorly with my running routine, but I was walking for sure. I joined a soccer league last summer for the first time since before I had any of my children. And I'm playing again this summer, just because I needed something. Like I was working all the time, and then I was being a mom all the time, and I needed
which is also work.
Yeah, I love it, but it's work. So I needed something for me. I also have learned how to set boundaries, which didn't come easy for me. I am a pleaser for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely tend towards the perfectionism side of the spectrum. In your world, try to be a bit of a hero a lot.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for me to get caught up in saying yes all of the time to all of the things. I think the key thing in the last year that happened was somebody had asked me for something, and it was a volunteer opportunity, and I said no. And my husband was like, "Whoa, that's amazing."
Who are you?
I was like, I can't do that. Like, I can feel the stress already. Like, I can't do that. And he's like, wow, I've never seen you do that before. And I'm already like, I made a rule that I only book 1 evening appointment a week, because some of my clients need evening appointments. Like, for instance, if they're in the trades, they can't do their financials during the day when they're on the job. So I set 1 evening appointment a week. And unfortunately, you can wait until my next evening appointment is open, to make sure that I'm around a little bit. And then this summer, I plan on only working 2 days a week.
Amazing.
Summer.
Yeah. Which, good for you. How does that feel?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm so excited. I need it. I don't think I could not do it at this point. I'm trying to do too much. So it's definitely required. And I mean, stuff will pop up. I know that, but I've already laid the groundwork to my clients and saying, I'm available. My bookkeeping staff will be here full time still.
Yes. Nice to have a team that you can rely on, right?
Yeah, for sure. And they'll still be doing all of the bookkeeping, and that's going to be going status quo. I will just only be available for 2 days a week.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and it sounds like you did what you had to do last year, right? It was so much uncertainty, and you were very successful through it. And I would love for you to celebrate that more rather than feel guilty for it, because you're not the only one, right? Others have done really well, and you said so yourself. But I get it. It's, there's many, many struggling out there too. So congratulations on an awesome year. I think that's awesome. And I love that you're recognizing where you need to slow down and what you need for that. And I was almost laughing in my head when you're like, I need quiet time. And I'm like, how do you get that with 3 kids in your house? But how cool is it that they get to see their mom building this amazing business? I'm sure they're really proud of you too. And I'm curious to know, like, what is that like finding that balance too? Like, I'm guessing the 2 days a week this summer is a big part because you want to spend the time with the kids. How have you been managing that?
I've even had entrepreneurs, and a lot of people, like I know a lot of entrepreneurs that have started their businesses before they had kids or have started their businesses after their kids have grown. And they all look at me a little sideways because, well, my youngest was 1. So that means I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old when I started my business. So I think the balance is a little bit of a challenge. What I've learned is that I need to just accept that it comes in seasons. That I have to just let go of feeling guilty, because for a very long time I felt so guilty. Like I'm not there sometimes. I miss stuff. There's just times when I am preoccupied and I have to work on a Saturday to get stuff done. And they have to go hang out with my husband for the day, outside of the house so I can get work done. And that was kind of terrible at first. But over the last little while, I think I've realized that, there's going to be seasons. There's going to be seasons when I'm really busy, and there's going to be seasons when I have time to spend with them. And I just have to accept that if I really do work really well from now until June, I'm going to only be working 2 days all summer, and we can hang out all summer. I make it a big deal to make sure that I'm at their activities, that I'm at all of the sports and the piano lessons and all the things. So I drive them to their piano lessons and usually take work calls in the parking lot. But I do try really hard to make sure that it's me, because sometimes in the evenings I am preoccupied with meetings. So I do like to be, when I can, available.
Yeah. It sounds like you're finding ways to just make it work, which is great. And like thinking back to when we started this chat and you're talking about how it was growing up with your parents doing this. I mean, you faced a lot of that as a child too. And look how great you turned out. So it's not, it's not impacting them. If anything, it's probably showing them, like, if you have a dream, this is what it takes to make it happen. Right. And I think that's really cool that they could grow up witnessing that firsthand.
Well, I'm glad for your perspective.
Yeah. It's not easy. And, I know a lot of our listeners are parents as well, right? And trying to run their own business. So I always love to hear, what is that like for you, and what are some of the things that you've been learning? And at this stage, with these ages, this is what it's like. And that's going to continue to change. Once they're all in school, that'll be different, and, forever evolving.
Well, and I think I have a very small window before I start losing some of them. And I say that in a nice way of, like, they're just not going to want to hang out with me anymore.
Right. I hear that a lot from parents. They're like, oh, when's that going to happen? We got to soak it up while we can.
Right. So we camp for this summer, and they still want to come camping with us. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that, take it while I can and enjoy it, because it's not like I know he's only 9, but I have very limited years left. I think the biggest message in the balance of parenting and business is not that I'm doing it well, because I know that I'm not. I also don't know that there is really a balance in parenting and business all of the time. I think the biggest notion is just to be kind to myself when I feel it happen, when I feel like, okay, this is maybe not how I imagined this going, but we'll change that, and, give them time tomorrow or something. And just being kind, because being guilty about it all the time is not doing anybody any favors.
No, that's not going to help the anxiety. And it's not, I think that's a great approach. There's no perfect way to do it. There's no awesome way to do it. And what works this week might not work next week. And what works for your family won't be what works for anyone else's. So
absolutely.
Grace and kindness to yourself, first and foremost. Yeah. Great message, Angela. That's awesome. Oh man, I've really been enjoying this conversation, and I know that you have kids to put to bed. So we'll get to wrapping it up. I'd love for you to share, where can our listeners and viewers find you if they're interested in learning more about what you do? Yeah.
So I'll start with my website. It's pretty easy. It's just angelamcdonald.com, MAC. Email is info@angelamcdonald.com, and Angela McDonald Consulting on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I just use my personal profile on LinkedIn.
Perfect. That's great. And is there anything happening in your business right now that you want to share, or anything else you wanted to add before we say goodbye?
Not really. I think the biggest message that I like to tell entrepreneurs is really just that everybody's messy underneath. And it's not necessarily just finance. It could be anything, but there's this preconceived notion that we look at some businesses that are thriving and succeeding and think, oh, I wish I was like them. They have it all figured out. I've been in those businesses too. They're just as messy as the other guys.
That's awesome comfort.
Like, and they know it too, right? Like, it's like, it's the same thing. Like, oh, I don't know why everybody thinks we're doing such a great job because this, and this is such a mess. So I think the biggest thing for entrepreneurs to realize is that even if something seems a little bit messy and they feel alone, probably every single person in their entrepreneur circle is feeling the exact same thing and not willing to share it because they feel like they'll be judged. Because I've had that conversation way too many times.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's so important for everyone to remember. And maybe that's something that we can normalize as a conversation amongst one another rather than pretending we've got it all together.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great message. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time tonight. Lots of great nuggets to share with our community. So thank you for your time. I know it's very valuable and it's limited. So we appreciate you being here tonight. And
thank you for having me. I had a blast.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Your first podcast. Check. And to our listeners and our viewers, thank you so much. If you have any questions, please reach out directly to Angela or let us know. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Thriving Tides. Hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.
Follow us, Thriving Tides, on Facebook, Instagram, and now YouTube to stay connected. And remember, don't fight the rip currents.